It's Hearthstone Grandmasters for the Asia Pacific region, and we are back with another very exciting match. We have the two players right up at the top of Division A. We've had a whole tour of Division A from the very top to the very bottom so far, but now we are getting the absolute creme de la creme of Division A so far, with Alutemu up against Flurry. We're finally getting to see a little bit of mage action as well, which I personally am very happy about. It's a deck that I'm very, very fond of, and it's going to be Alutemu on that mage. He's been doing very, very well so far, and I just want to hear right off the gate your opinion on this mage deck. What do you got for us?
I think that mage in general right now is an incredibly strong deck. We saw in Vegas that it was by far the highest performing deck.
Yes.
That could be because of a lot of GMs bringing it, and that being a factor, but just in general, it was incredibly high performing at whooping 57% win rate overall, which is very strong for a deck that a lot of people say is very complicated to play. So you don't actually expect even the best of the best to play it perfectly all the time, and you see a lot of people just throw games. And also we see Alutemu bringing this, I think, for the third time in a row now. I think he brought it last week, and he brought it to Vegas, and now he brings it again.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. He's performing super well with a 7-1 total score now. And we see that he kind of has his own cool mix on the mage with questing adventures and 2 Frostbolts and a Luna's Pocket Galaxy in the main deck. I think that this is a very big hedge towards the mage mirror.
Right.
And I think he's basically just looking at how Vegas ended up, and he just thinks that a lot of people will go towards the mage. And therefore he's running the 2 Frostbolts, Questing Adventures, and Luna's Pocket Galaxy. I think that Frostbolt is a very underrated card in the mage in general. It's just a super nice tool to just have in general. It just works pretty well with the deck. You can just clear some minions. In the mage mirror, it's actually incredibly strong because the deck in general just struggles a lot with dealing with stuff. And having an efficient answer to the Sorcerer Pentaton 2 often is just game deciding, and the one player with the Frostbolt can just end up winning the game just on the back of the Frostbolt and the tempo it provides for later.
They absolutely can. There's a couple of other interesting exclusions in the deck. Ziliax not being in there, Sandbinder being in there. Ziliax in particular, I think, could hurt him up against Flurry's Rogue deck, which we can take a look at now. Because Luna's Pocket Galaxy, while it can be very good against the later game decks, against the aggression that Flurry can provide, it might be a little bit weaker, especially as Flurry has a pretty decent anti-mage primary deck here with Walk the Plank in his primary. Not something you see all too often.
Yeah, this is, again, a very interesting build, and you clearly see that Flurry is hedging towards the mage, maybe expecting his opponent to bring mage. And he hits the mage here on Alutemu, which maybe was expected due to the fact that he has brought mage in previous weeks. And yeah, his general idea here is that he's running the super aggressive cards with the deckhands and the eviscerates, and at the same time he has the sap and the walk the planks for the big giants. So it's going to be pretty difficult. Also, Sea Giant is actually pretty good versus mage, because a lot of the time with Rogue you go pretty wide with the miscreant stuff, and mage doesn't really have a way to deal with that. So what you end up having a lot of time is that mage just keeps on dealing with your biggest minion, but doesn't deal with any of your small minions. So a lot of the time you just have a bunch of small minions, and then having a giant for cheap mana is just pretty solid. So I think that Flurry has a very good shot on being the mage here with his specific rogue lists.
Yeah, it's... I mean, I'm looking through this list.
He even has a sideboard that is even more.
You are correct. What, the Betrayal, Cold Blood, double Henge Clan Thug, and another Walk the Plank that he can throw in there as well. I'm interested to see how this performs. Like, I'm looking through and trying to figure out what he's cut from the regular Rogue list, because he's including Deckhand and Ziliax, and obviously the Walk the Plank as well, none of which are core cards.
Yes, he's cutting the Burgle package.
Oh yeah, of course, you're correct, yeah.
I don't know exactly how I think about that. I mean, in theory, he's playing a more aggressive build, right? But at the same time, he's cutting some of the better cards in the matchup, with Blink Fox and Vendetta being 2 extremely strong cards, in my opinion. I think that one of the best ways for the Rogue to beat the Mage build is that they just go Blink Fox on 3 and just keep on putting consistent pressure with all right minions, and just nothing too strong, but you just keep on playing consistent minions and keep on generating value. And I also think it's pretty interesting how he built his sideboard with cutting backstabs and SI7 agents, which could potentially leave him very weak to early aggression from the mage, which mage is capable of. So we'll see how that goes in the later games.
I'm yet to be convinced on Flurry's rogue deck, but 5-3 record, he's clearly doing pretty well so far. And I believe he had an even better start before starting to lose a few games in the later half of the first half of Season 1 of the Grandmasters. And he's got a hand at the moment that could become very good in the future, but is a little bit lacking at the moment.
He does have the coin.
Yes,
which
that's true.
Not only is very strong for his deck, it's very strong for him that his opponent does not have the coin. So it's just a very strong thing in general in the current meta game we have right now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird, to be honest, because like historically in Hearthstone it's always been better to be on the play. But in this specific meta we have right now, it's way better to be on the coin.
The majority of the time, yeah.
Like, if you're playing a deck that doesn't want to be on the coin, you still want to be on the coin because your opponent wants to be on the coin. So
that's true.
It's a bit interesting. But we see that Flurry doesn't really have too much of an aggressive hand here. And Alutemu has the Luna's Pocket Galaxy, which is an interesting inclusion in his deck that might actually play off quite a bit now, because he has it on 5 and there's not too much aggression from Flurry.
I mean, we saw over the weekend how powerful Luna's Pocket Galaxy can be with Dog having it on 5 most games. I think it's fair to say that we saw him play on stream.
Yeah. Fair.
And, I mean, you know...
And it was pretty strong.
It was insane.
But at the same time, Dog was playing a different deck.
A totally different deck, that's true. Like,
so it's not exactly how it works in the Cyclone Mage, I would argue. But it's still really strong, especially when it's on 5. And you're not behind, because there's just... You just... After you play it, you're just on one draw to just win the game, basically. Oh, but... Talking about winning the game and one draw.
This is insane!
That
Look
is
at
a very good draw.
Of this. He can even coin it out. Does he coin it out or do you save that? You probably save that.
Dude, I'm coining it out.
You're coining it out?
Yes. I'm coining it out.
I mean, this is basically saying to Alutemu, if you don't have Conjurer's Calling to Conjurer's Calling
maybe don't coin
Edwin.
it out. I might be a bit too hype about coining it out. Maybe it wasn't good.
How much does that giant cost at the moment? 8 cards in hand, that costs 5 mana, I believe. So it's playable on this turn with one of the elemental evocations, but I mean, you just get value traded, or Flurry just goes face at that point. Like
big value trade. big value trade.
All right.
He's going for the giant. What would have been good is that if he could have went elemental evocation, then giant, and then frostbolt afterwards.
He can banana it, but that doesn't really make too much difference.
But also with Flurry having the main deck that he has, the giant just gets answered by both the sap and the walk the plank. So it's extremely desperate to just play out the giant here together with the evocation, but he just thinks in a terrible spot.
I wonder if this was right though, because given that Alutemu is clearly in a dreadful position here, maybe he should have gone Frostbolt on the Edwin to save the health, ping the 1/1, and then next turn, if he got the top deck of
Ray of Frost?
Conjurer's Calling, he could have gone double evocation giant Conjurer's Calling, I think. Or would that have been 1-off? I think it would have been playable because it would have been at 4 mana down to 2, and then he could have played it with the...
I'm not sure.
Maybe not. Maybe
and I didn't count it, but
yeah.
There was some consideration in just not playing the giant there. And
That's what I mean.
And just trying to like constantly freeze the Edwin, but he's basically just playing from the top of his deck at that point, and he kind of had to play from the top of his deck no matter what. But
and I mean,
he just decided like a route to take it.
Yes, and with the way it's worked out, it will cost 4 mana next turn, which means
he's basically
it will be playable with a top deck Conjurer's Calling next turn if he wants to.
Yes. Also, he basically thinks that Flurry going for the sap there is just the best turn for him that he could go for the sap.
Right.
And most of the time he has to tank this Edwin one time anyways. So he's just trying to force Flurry to just play a bit more defensively, and because he can't really do anything with the sap. So he forces him to only play the sap there if he has the sap, and then he can potentially draw a bunch of freezes and get the Conjure Calling. So this could work out for him, actually. I'm not sure what's the correct line.
It was complicated.
It's difficult, you know, Derek, when it's turn 4 and they have a 12-12 Edwin on board.
That does sound kind of tricky.
That is pretty tricky, yeah.
I mean, it's a taste of their own medicine for Mage, right? Who's playing 16 worth of stats on turn 4.
Sometimes, yeah. True. We have a potential comeback turn now, though. We could play the Giant together with the Nova. And
I mean,
if
that has to be the turn, right?
yes. I don't think there's any other options. And if we manage to draw Conjure Calling together with a Ray of Frost,
that's not bad. He could do it, right? We could see Arcane Intellect that still leaves him the possibility of going Ray of Frost, Conjurer's Calling.
C-Giant will be pretty good, though. Because that will value trade in the best case scenario for Alutemu.
Grave Horror.
It will value trade the Grave Horror.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any other plays here.
Well, like, he could look at AI, Frost Nova, but
We could also,
what does that open up?
yes. You could go for, there's another play. You can go for, this might actually be the winning play. You could go for AI and then Element, and go for the top deck Ray of Frost, and then Elemental Evocation the Giant, and then Ray of Frost.
Okay.
So if he thinks that he needs the Ray of Frost anyways, this might just be the better order to do it, because then you have the Nova for the bigger board the next turn.
That's definitely interesting.
I'll be very surprised if it does that play, though. But
Because,
yeah,
like, Ray of
I
Frost,
don't think that play is totally unreasonable here.
Ray of Frost is just as good next turn, though, right? So he may as well go for the draw for it next turn.
No, it's not. It's not about Ray of Frost is not just as good next turn. It's about Frost Nova being way better than Ray of Frost next turn.
Yeah, okay.
Because now Flurry will always redevelop the board, right, and have more stuff. And you can only freeze the Edwin with the Ray of Frost, while only freezing the Edwin this turn was fine. And like you tank a bit, but then you have the Frost Nova for next turn, which is actually a comeback.
Yeah.
So
Super.
I didn't actually mind it. Now that I think more about it, but that is a very. You have to put yourself in a very bad position.
It's a brave play.
It's a brave play, yeah. It's not a play you see often,
Yeah.
for sure. So I definitely see how he's deciding that this is what he wants to do.
Oh. Khadgar as well. I mean, he can't even play it with the Conjurer's Calling if it comes off the top. It's double magic trick. He could find a Frost Nova here. That's not it, though.
Yeah. This doesn't make the cut. We could potentially Astral Rift into Godfrey.
I mean, yes, I suppose. I think it's more likely that we see Magic Trick into Ray of Frost, right? And then...
Yeah.
That's the out. That's the only card I think he can hit at this point that keeps him alive. And now the
Another
second
magic
one, like,
trick.
he doesn't even, he doesn't have the mana.
doesn't make the cut anymore.
Yeah.
Is there any... No, it's not. Yeah. Just a super aggressive start from Flurry. And with a 12-12 Edwin on turn 3. And also the sap for the Giant counter play.
That was insane.
Just very hard for Alutemu to navigate himself in winning positions.
Yeah, just everything going right there for Flurry. Like you said, the coin, the Edwin, stopping everything from Alutemu. But, I mean, I think I liked what I saw from Alutemu. Like, the one real decision point for me was, like you said, we could have seen the Frost Nova and the Arcane Intellect, but the more interesting play for me was whether or not he should have gone for the Giant on the turn he played the Giant, right? Because we could have seen Frostbolt and then wait and hope to hit Frost Nova off the top to go with the Giant, or hope to hit Ray of Frost to go with the Giant as well. Whereas as he played it, it opened him up to Sap and the Walk the Plank, both of which would have been pretty devastating to not being able to Conjurer's Calling the Giant.
Yeah, he could have taken like more of a freeze mage type of game plan, because his deck actually kind of allows that with having double Ray of Frost, double Frostbolt, double Frost Nova. So that might have been the better decision to make. I'm not sure. He decided to go for a risky play there, and it didn't really pay off. But what you have to ask is that, would it have paid off if it didn't have the sap? Which I'm not even sure if it would have, because technically we did have the answer to Edwin then, because his idea is that he plays the Giant, right? It's an 8/8, and then next turn you can Frostbolt ping the Edwin, and then it's dealt with. But is that even a winning position at that point? Because then you're giving your opponent and then your opponent gets a free turn to do whatever they want, and then they get another free turn.
Yeah.
So you have to yeah, you kind of have to just ask yourself what is the winning line here, and because it's in a terrible position, and I think that Alutemu went for good lines, and you could argue that some of the other lines are better because they have different ways to win.
Yeah.
But it's just very hard to tell, you know.
And I think that's something you have to do with Mage in particular, is you very often, I find, have to play to outs off the top. Like, you have to know what is the only way I can win, and how do I set up for that, which is often Frost Nova off the top, Kundra's calling off the top, which I think maybe Alutemu could have played to a little bit more. But even in that situation, we're talking about super fringe outs to have really any chance in that game at all.
Yes. And especially in Alutemu's version also, it's basically just a freeze mage at this point, where you run 2 images, 2 Ray of Frost, Frostballs, Novas, Cyclones, Magic Tricks, just so much potential for freeze. So slowly playing it and playing to your potential top deck freeze is a very real thing, and something he could have done, but he decided to not necessarily do. Or he did it in a different way. There's different ways you can do it, right? And you can do more risky plays, and you can do less risky plays that are both risky, but it's just super hard to be able to manage how much of a risk you want to take, because you have to evaluate your position, right, and see how likely am I to win here, and how and what risk is the better risk to take in the position I am in. And he was in a really bad position with 12 Edwin just hitting him. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
Basically, Mage is quite hard.
Mage is very hard for sure. There's a lot of very close decisions that, well, I don't think anyone can play it out perfectly, and I don't think you can 100% say anything was necessarily wrong, like those turns. It's just a lot of opinions, and people just have to play the deck a lot and manage to maneuver as good as possible with the deck.
As I believe we got word of what both of these players are switching to in terms of their secondary and tertiary deck. It makes a lot of sense, as we can see here, Alutemu switching over to his anti-rogue variant on the tertiary deck. Halftime Scavengers, I know, are a card that you're fairly fond of in terms of fighting against rogue. The Snip Snap and Zilliax as well also seem to make some amount of sense to me.
Yes, he's basically just putting in more anti-aggro cards, and cards that rogue isn't very good at interacting with, which is stealth minions, right? And the halftime scavenger kind of provides, especially versus the rogue sideboard, a lot of the time running double betrayal, etc. Here we see Flurry with 1 betrayal, 2 walk the planks, right? It just provides them with a minion they can target and gain tempo of, and that is very valuable at the same time as it can do value trades and set up your conch callings. And besides that, I feel like he's kind of just including cards that you would normally put in your main deck, but since he prioritized facing Mage with his main deck and like leaning towards Mage, he didn't include him in the main deck, but now decides to include him in the sideboard. Yeah,
and it's weird to say that Rogue used to be the stealth class, and now it's suffering against stealth. It brings a tear to my eye of the good old concealed days with Questing Adventurer.
Yeah, that was pretty good, that card.
But speaking of the Rogue, they also have a few tricks up their sleeve in order to deal with what the Mage is throwing forward. Betrayal, Cold Blood, double Hench Clan Thug, and the Walk the Plank added in for Flurry to be able to fight back against the Rogue. It makes against the Mage, sorry, as we can see here. It makes a lot of sense. The Betrayal can be very, very nice against those great big giant boards. But for me, the inclusions I like even more than the slightly more obvious Walk the Plank and Betrayal is the Hench Clan Thugs, because this is not immediately obvious when you start playing against Mage that this is what it would be weak to, but it turns out that Hench Clan Thug is super difficult for Mage to deal with.
Yes, a lot of the time for the Mage, the most difficult thing to deal with is just early consistent pressure with, for example, Hench Clan Thug, and I would say that Blink Fox is also incredibly annoying. Also SI7 agent. Which comes to another important point, which is what he decides to remove in his sideboard, which is Backstab, Saucy Deckhand, and SI7 agent, which is the type of cards that are very good at dealing with Mage's early aggression with the Sorcerer Apprentice, Mirror Images, Cyclones, etc. So it would be interesting to see how that pays off for him, because I think that Mage is way more reliable now to make sort of a different game plan where you just go more aggressive and play, like, you don't have to play around SI7 agents and backstabs too much anymore. So it's a very interesting sideboard. I'm not sure if I like it or not yet. I don't think I can ever cut any of these cards.
Right.
So we'll see how it turns out. It's cool. It's cool.
We will see, and I think this it brings a really interesting facet into this game, which is I anticipate that the real thing this is going to test isn't necessarily how Flurry's rogue performs, but how Alutemu can adapt his mage gameplay. Because we've seen not only the evolution of the mage deck list over the recent weeks, we've also seen the evolution of how it's played. Because I remember back at the start of Grandmasters, it felt like mage was pretty much a slam giant and play Conjurer's Calling on it deck. Like, that's really what it did. And then if that failed, you sometimes went for the Mana Cyclone play to try and pull you back into the game. But now we're seeing more and more players just go with Apprentice on 2, Banana Buffoon on 3, and you just kill them.
Yeah, I feel like mage players have got a lot better since the first week. It's a super hard deck, and it's taken a lot of time for people to actually learn how to maneuver the hands that are not the giant hands, right? And how to make the most out of hands that on paper aren't that strong and actually just making value of other good cards, which is Cyclone and the Sorcerer Pit, which is incredibly strong cards in the deck. But at the same time, it's very underrated because of the insanely powerful giant conjurers, which is the thing that people see the most in the deck. So yeah, that's very interesting. So we see that Alutemu already considering about his mulligan here. He has
it's super interesting, actually, I think.
Yeah, he has Snip Snap, Conch Calling, Khadgar, and Ziliax. So
like Snip Snap and Ziliax have some pretty obvious synergy that you could go for if you're afraid of early aggression.
See, this is a very interesting mulligan, right? Because now he runs the half-amp Scavengers in his deck. Also, he has the Snip Snap in his hand.
Right.
And Snip Snap is a very annoying minion.
Yes, it is.
And it's a lot of the time a minion that the rogue doesn't want to trade into. And also, this rogue version doesn't run too much early game.
Yes.
So basically, what Alutemu is doing here is that he's just saying that
it's just curving out.
Yeah, he just wants to play the Snip Snap into Conch Calling and then Khadgar Conch Calling. I really think this mulligan is not very obvious at all, and I think very few players would actually do this mulligan.
So do you like it?
I like it a lot.
Right.
I think this is extremely
shows a lot of knowledge of the deck.
Yeah, knowledge of the deck. Yeah, for sure. And you also see him here just cleaning out the Snip Snap. He knows that there's only one backstab.
What he could also do, though, is play the Khadgar, trade in the Snip Snap, and then get 4 1-1s instead of 2. Ooh.
He could do that.
Doesn't sound great, but it's something he could consider.
Yeah, he would leave himself. He would go into Sea Giant if he did that.
So basically, what you're saying is that he would turn a really good hand into a terrible hand with that line of play.
Yeah, that is the argument for not doing the Snip Snap keep, though. Actually, I mean, the Sea Giant is very strong now.
Oh, this seems a lot more like it, though. Like you said, the beautiful play of coin Snip Snap into Conjurer's Calling just means, like,
yes,
what can Flurry do? He has no backstabs
again,
or SIs.
this is the general game plan I was talking about before the match. That now the rogue has a lot of more clunky cards, and it doesn't have too many cards that deal with early game aggression, like the Sorcerer Apprentice.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the same thing, where the mage just goes on the aggressor, and the rogue just doesn't have too much things to play. But at the same time, Flurry has the miscreant here and has a lot of utilization and is able to deal with this fairly clean.
It's not bad, but oh my god, halftime Scavenger into Khadgar Conjurer's Calling is insane.
This is very good. And again, it's
This is actually insane.
This is also a very good example of why the Khadgar Calling keep is so good for him, because it's not about the giant necessarily, but the half-amp Scavenger is insane with the Khadgar Calling.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible for the rogue deck to come back from that. For the giant, it's actually possible to beat because you can actually interact with it, right? And also, after you Conch Calling the giant, you actually have the Betrayal, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really work versus the half-amp Scavenger.
I also want to point out that I really like Alutemu's trading here because it wasn't so obvious how he did that. He could have gone all face, he could have killed off the miscreant, or he could just trade one of his minions, which means Sea Giant is not playable for Flurry.
That is
But that is a very important minion to get there.
That's so good. That's actually so good.
What?
Dude.
Khadgar Conjurer's Calling is out.
You can look at Alutemu's reactionary. It's actually a disaster for him.
The end is in fact coming.
If Flurry notices Alutemu's double keep and the situation here, he just plays into this Doomsayer now, and it's going to be super annoying for Alutemu.
I mean, I guess this was the hour.
This was very strong. It would have not been over anything if he didn't get this, but
He could even, I mean, he could have stepped the faceless lackey there to go for Togwaggle next turn, I guess.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's actually a very good point.
I mean, that was pretty good, right?
Yeah, that seemed pretty good. Not gonna lie. So what does kill this thing now? Yeah, you should have just done that, right? Just stepped it.
Like, I think he wants to move that as quick to move towards that as quick as possible.
There's not too much that kills the Doomsayer, right? So there's
Right.
not that much consider. Like Doomsayer almost always procs hair.
Yes.
Right.
Like if Alutemu goes for Conjurer's Calling on it,
And-
you're so happy.
Yeah, and if Doomsayer procs hair, having the Togwaggle next turn is just.
Yes, that's insane.
You have a point here, Derek.
I finally did it. I have a point. It only took 4 games.
It was probably correct to Shadow Step it. Yeah. Yeah, we should have Shadow Stepped it. But he didn't Shadow Step it, and
I mean, he's got reasonable plays next turn. He can still go Lackey, Miscreant, and then step the Miscreant and play more Lackeys.
Yes.
But that does start playing into opposing Sea Giants.
yeah, and also it's a bit slower, right? Being faster is the most important thing.
Dude, this was just the disaster for Alutemu.
It was really
The
unfortunate.
absolute disaster.
It was really unfortunate, yeah.
You hate to see good plays go unrewarded, because I think, like you said, the more I look at this hand or the keep from Alutemu, I think it was a really heads-up keep.
Yeah, I agree.
Still a pretty powerful turn here for Alutemu.
Oh, it picks up the Mana Cyclone. That's really strong, right? He could potentially go Mirror Image,
Could go
Arcane Missiles.
Does he
and
ever go
then-
Khadgar Mirror Image?
Oh, if you go Khadgar Image.
That does play into the Rogue's Sea Giant, because Flurry is obviously
also,
playing the
also, I'm not sure about
Sea
going.
Giant version.
Funnily enough, if you go the Khadgar Image line, Flurry might be happy board looking you. Like,
That's actually true.
and because
You just can't play anything big.
It depends a bit because right now, I'm not sure if Flurry is gonna do that though. But right now, if Flurry actually does that, it's super bad for Alutemu because it doesn't have anything big to play behind it.
Yeah.
So it's just gonna play mediocre stuff, and then Flurry just gets to develop way more than him. So he's just gonna go for the slow play here and just go for the Scavenger plus ping, I assume here. And then he's setting up a
Is he not
potential
setting up for triple spell? Like, Mirror Image, Arcane Missiles, Vate, Cyclone, still pretty good, right?
Yeah, that was
I like
basically his decision towards the end there. He was considering between this and just pinging, and then
Yeah,
saving the Cyclone for a later.
I think I like
Moment.
this. I think it sets up a lot of defensive abilities on this turn, and it sets up for Khadgar Conjurer's Calling next turn.
What about the Betrayal positioning though, Derek? You could potentially betrayal the Mana Cyclone to kill both images now.
Good point. That was wrong. I mean, he had like 3 seconds to make that play at the end there. I think he's just happy he got it on board.
It was a bait, Derek. He just baited the Betrayal. It was like, let's push this in here so he betrayals.
That was actually the Galaxy Brain play
The
there
Galaxy Brain
from
play.
Alutemu. It was also, it's worth pointing out, terrible Crushing Walls positioning there for Alutemu, putting this halftime Scavenger on the edge. Terrible.
Yeah. But yeah, Flurry just
Wow.
slow playing it here and
Stepping the
gaining
Togwaggle.
value.
Is this, do you like this? I feel like stepping Togwaggle is like, it's the right play a lot less often than you think. Because it's just super slow stepping a 5/5 here. I don't know, I feel like he's got enough value already, right? Like, he just needs to go towards the lethal plan. Because with Wondrous Wand, Waggle Pick, and
Yeah,
the Life Drinker...
It does seem a bit pretty hard to fit in. I also think that at this point you just always make the read on the Khadgar being in the hand.
Yes.
Knowing the keep off.
No,
This is
that-
pretty
it's just
okay.
a 4/3. Yeah, those are fine.
This is pretty average, I would say.
Nothing too bad. Ooh. That's not good quite yet, but that could be a very good card
This turn is
in the coming turns.
very hard.
Because Flurry hasn't really got himself in a position where he can go for the burst damage to push everything face.
No, he's not close to doing that yet.
But how does he get back board here? That wasn't a great set of cards to get off the wand there.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
I mean, I guess he's getting closer to the burst plan with Cold Blood in hand.
He could potentially walk the plank everything, but it doesn't feel
I think he's gonna lucky. He's gonna tog waggle.
He's gonna tog waggle again and like go again for next turn.
Does he go for another wand?
Yeah, I think he's gonna go for another one. I think that he thinks that his deck is better than the random legendaries. What he could consider is that his position is so bad, so he has to go for the random legendaries. There's like a couple of them that are extremely powerful. Like for example, in this situation, we could have Undasta. Very powerful.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and Undasta would be pretty nuts actually. Or the King Crush. Oh no, wait. That's
that doesn't work.
That's a Hunter one. Yeah. That would be good though if you could get it. Ziliax would be pretty good.
That would be good. Yeah, Ziliax would be good. There's probably some other ones that would be good too. I just can't remember.
But I think like as it usually tends to be the case, Wondrous Wand is more likely to get you an out.
You have your own deck to play with.
Exactly.
Which is normally the better thing to do.
Especially as he's got Spirit of the Shark. Like as soon as he hits Evil Cable Rat or Novice Engineer or whatever cheap, powerful Battlecry minion, Flurry can just really start to turbo through his power cards.
Yes, for sure. You can also just hit Sea Giant. Like Flurry doesn't actually have too much big value cards because he does cut all of the Burgle package and he runs preps and such, so it becomes a bit more light. But he has some good hits for sure. You can also hit the Edwin.
Yeah.
Which would be not very good because there's like infinite freeze in the deck, so. And now it's very late, so it's not that strong for him. But at the same time, he's just alright on board right now. Like Alutemu doesn't have too much pressure and just keeps on developing as he does.
Yeah. I quite like this from Alutemu as well. Like, I think that the other thing I was looking at on this turn was Ray of Frost plus Mountain Giant, which develops a big minion and could have traded some of the stuff off. But until he finds Conjurer's Calling, Mountain Giant was actually just like pretty weak to either the second Walk the Plank or the Sap.
Yeah.
So I don't mind saving the Giant for the Conjurer's Calling on the same turn.
We also see that he, more importantly this turn, did position correctly for Betrayal.
Yes, he did. I mean, that's the thing for Alutemu, right? As with all Hearthstone players, is first of all you want to make sure you're doing your turn full stop, and then you want to do it correctly.
This trade does not feel good.
The Cold Blood VT.
Dude, look at this 9 damage.
I mean, is Flurry under pressure of lethal? Like, if he goes face hit and then gets frozen, I think the 2 damage he takes is fine. I think I like going face hit.
Yeah, his idea is that he's just afraid of this Togwaggle just not connecting again or something, and then he just 2-7 just keeps on going face.
This play's kind of a dream though for Alutemu. The Giant, Conjurer's Calling, Ray of Frost.
Yeah, he would potentially be weak to some of the tech inclusions of Flurry though, but he has played a lot of it already this game. I think he's played 2 Walk the Planks and the Sap. Or did he play the Sap? I'm not sure if he played the Sap. Maybe he did.
I think it's just the 2 Walk the Planks.
Yeah, just the 2 Walk the Planks.
Which means it's really just Betrayal that he's super weak to now.
Yeah, it's Betrayal, but he's run a bunch of cards, so that is a card that's totally in his range by this point, but I don't think you can actually afford to play around it.
I agree. He's got to do something, right?
Yeah, so I think he's just going to go for the Giant Conjurer's Calling. Maybe he's thinking about if there's a better way to do it.
What else is he considering? Like Ziliax double Ray of Frost to clear? Like that feels so much weaker.
Could be considering just not Conjurer's Calling. How did I actually call it? I didn't even think about it myself. Anyways, yeah, he's just not Conjurer's Calling.
I mean, you know, if he's seen both Walk the Planks, then having the single Giant is obviously less weak. And
also, again, Flurry's deck just doesn't run that much reactive stuff. He does cut 2 of the SIs. There's no Vendettas.
That's true, that's true.
There's 1 less Backstab, and we already saw a Backstab this game, I think. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
It doesn't run that many cheap spells either, so your counter spell has a pretty good chance of just stopping the Wondrous Wand.
Yep.
Like, even if he doesn't play it, Flurry will be scared to play it at all.
Yes, it could also just stop a prep, which would be worse. But yeah, I think this single Giant is just surprisingly very annoying for Flurry to deal with. It would turn out better the other way around versus Flurry's hand, but
Yes.
he's clearly showing a lot of respect for what Flurry's potential here is. Or, I mean, this turned out better, to be honest, because the Wondrous one, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But, yeah, he's clearly just showing respect to all of Flurry's potential hand here.
But now we can see some really powerful stuff from Alutemu. He just has to sequence it correctly, right? Because if he goes face, Conjurer's Calling, freeze with the Ray of Frost, and then he can go Ziliax in the middle of the two giants, right? To play around Betrayal, or the two Grave Horrors even.
Well, the Grave Horrors already kind of play around Betrayal, in a way.
Yes, I guess
A bit.
Ziliax plays around it more though, right? Like,
Does
if you
it
put those in
always?
between, it means the giants can't hurt each other.
Well, do you ever want them to hurt each other, though? He doesn't have any way to chip 1 damage.
I guess.
Maybe you
Do you
sometimes
see this go
want them.
Conjurer's Calling again? I guess that can run into the problem of mountain giants, which are weak
Yes.
to the Betrayal.
I think
Yeah.
he likes having like one of each of these now. Also, this is just way better recipe because both of them cost 0 now.
Yes, yeah.
So I think it might be that he just doesn't place it in the middle, but he decides to place it in the middle.
I think I still like it, right? Because like maybe he has some way of even if well, he can't tank the one actually, but
Yeah.
I guess he doesn't actually have much way to deal 1 damage because the SI7 agents aren't there.
Okay, now he gets away to proc the counter spell.
He may not even do it though, right? Like Flurry may think he's in such a bad position that it has to be Spellbender, and then he hits all the spells for lethal or something. I don't know.
Also, I didn't actually get to talk about it last turn, but Flurry didn't know it was counter spell, right?
No.
So he could have taken the risk on Wondrous
Yes.
one last turn, which would have probably been better than what it did if it wasn't counter spell. But I didn't really look at it at all, and like the potential of other secrets.
Right.
So
I mean, there was a lot
can't
of
really
stuff to
blame him
play.
for that.
But I
Yeah.
have to say, I'm very happy for Alutemu taking that game. I think there was some very, very good plays from him there that led him through to a victory. And to be honest, I kind of disagreed with some of Flurry's lines that he was taking there. I think he could have, given the good RNG that he got with the Doomsayer, which very much pulled him back in the game, I think he could have capitalized on that a little bit more by stepping the Lackey to
Yes,
go
he
for
would have
Lackey
gotten-
Togwaggle.
Way much more tempo by stepping
Yeah.
the Lackey, and then he would have gotten into a turn next turn where he could have potentially played the Spirit of the Shark and just
Right.
getting way more pressure. And I think that was potentially just a game-losing play in that.
Right. And I think even after that, I disagree with stepping the Togwaggle as well, because I think that was too big a loss of tempo. And if we look at how it would have shaken out, he would have just, even if he wasn't trading, he could have just pushed face and maybe gone for lethal with Eviscerates on the following turns. That one I think is a little bit closer, because there is obvious value to having an extra Togwaggle to get another Wondrous one. We saw that almost pulled him back in the game. But overall, even though we disagree with some of Flurry's lines, I think Alutemu in general showed really good understanding of the matchup.
Yes, I really liked how the Alutemu's general vision of just how to play that matchup.
Yeah.
There was some super close turns there, but the idea of just getting ahead and the conjure calling, cat guard, snap keep, and the way he piloted, like not going for the conjure's calling.
Yeah.
Even though it was a pretty close call not going for the conjure's calling versus the counter spell, the idea of doing that and just not conjure's calling is just something that almost no one would do.
Right.
And I think it's just a super reasonable play. And one that he got super rewarded for it.
He did indeed. And I think it not only is it a good play in general, it really exploits the weakness of Flurry's techs, because Flurry has clearly gone for an anti like giant plan, right? Like he's trying to kill off the giants, the grave horrors and whatever. He's not got a plan that kills off the small minions at all.
I also think that what I said earlier might have been actually wrong, because I think that he could just make the read on no prep, because he already had the Wondrous one in hand and another Wondrous one. So he could have already played the Wondrous one if he had the prep. So
Right.
you could actually just make the read on no prep. And what is it even at that point that can actually proc the counterspell? There's almost nothing.
Right, yeah.
So I think it's just a very smart play, and he recognized the position and made a play that seems pretty odd, but just was, I think, a lot better there.
I think it was, and it's showing the power of not only teching against Rogue effectively, because we saw how good, well, I'm going to correct that, we saw how good Halftime Scavenger should have been in the majority of cases. Halftime Scavenger should have just won in the game on the spot there, if obviously the the Doomsayer hadn't come down. But I think in general it shows the power not only of sideboarding well, but playing well against your opponent's deck, showing if you know the matchup very well, you will be able to come out ahead, taking a win in this you're going to hate me for saying this, unfavorable matchup against the Rogue. What's your opinion on that? What do you think about this matchup of Mage versus Rogue in general?
It's a interesting matchups. I know there's a lot of different opinions floating around, and both of the decks have very strong power level, and both the very good draws and the very bad draws are it's just very volatile in general. So it's very natural that there's a lot of different opinions because there's just so many different outcomes of the games. But I think it's I would rather play on the Mage side every time, but I know a lot of people think differently, so I'm not sure. I like the Mage side, but I might be biased. I don't know.
It's so hard to tell with like GM discussions, right? Because I mean, funnily enough, it turns out whatever deck you play more of, you tend to think is favored because GMs are all really good at Hearthstone, and so if they're just queuing up whatever deck they play on ladder, they're generally going to beat whoever they're facing, no matter what the matchup.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A lot of the GMs have a very different opinions on a lot of matchups, which is, I think, a lot caused by the top tier decks now are just so volatile and so based around good draws. So if you just practice a couple of matches versus yourself and your opponent or a random opponent, a lot of the time you just get the nut draws, which are just unbeatable, right? And I think a lot of the sample size that people have might be wrong because of just very low sample size.
Well, it's like at the moment in Hearthstone, it's kind of impossible to repeat a lot of games because there's so much stuff that you can never really repeat, whether it's random generation of Conjurers falling or the lackey outcomes or whatever.
Yes.
Which I think is the good kind of RNG a lot of the time because it tests how you use those cards effectively. But it does mean that sample size needs to be higher than ever.
Yes, for sure. It's very different from, for example, last year's meta where we had these decks like Tugwaggle Druid, Shadowwalk Shaman that had like not really any random outcomes. It was just consistently the same all the time. While it's kind of a different game because there's just different skill sets to both things. And right now we have a lot of random generation, and you kind of have to manage to play around that. And sometimes it's a bit stupid how volatile, especially when the decks are just so strong.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just very different, and it's a different skill set. It's definitely super hard to maneuver around it, though.
It is indeed. As jumping into the start of this game, Alutemu going with, again, carrying on with his just tempoing out game plan. The recently buffed unexpected results. I've had a pretty rocky relationship with this card, in which you saw me trying to build unexpected results spell damage tempo mage on day one of the patch, and lose about 10 stars in an hour. It did not go great.
I do remember that, Derek. It did not go great. It's a good summary. But yeah,
it's going better for Alutemu though.
It's a okay card, and here we again see that. I mean, he picked it from the magic trick, right? And we again see that Flurry just has very limited early game removal, and that makes Alutemu very possible to just play his cards.
Yeah.
And it not getting dealt with. And you'll see that good utilization of the Frostbolt here, getting to clear off the Hedge Clan effect that Flurry sideboarded.
Very powerful turn available to Flurry should he decide to take it. We can see a kind of repeat of last game, significantly less powerful, I guess, in terms of the Edwin, but still pretty good if he wanted to go for it this turn. But do you think he saves it for the Spirit of the Shark next turn? Or the turn after even? Although I guess this play does actually set up for a powerful Edwin next turn because he can bounce the Edwin back with the Waggle pick for a 1-mana more powerful Edwin.
Yes. Again though, this 3-2 is pushing a lot.
It is putting a lot of damage through.
I would either consider it as Flurry to just prep the Eviscerate, but at the same time he just wants to set up for this big Edwin.
You prep the Fate that turn.
No. You probably don't, but I see
it's tempting.
He's gonna get into some trouble here because he just doesn't have any reactive stuff, and if he goes tall with one minion, he just ends up like hitting Edwins into mirror images, which
which he's going to struggle to clear with only one backstab and no SI7 agents in this deck.
Correct. Yeah, that's basically the situation here. It's just a bit of a struggle to get through the 2 health minions.
Yeah, which I think is why I am not super fond of Flurry's sideboard. Like, I think his main deck is very much on the money, especially given that Alutemu has been playing a lot of mage recently, so Walk the Plank primary seems like a pretty good way to counter that very well. I think the cards he's switching out in his secondary deck is a little bit suspect, though, because like it's not like it would only be good in this game. You can pretty much expect SI7 agent to be good in a good amount of games versus mage, I think.
He's just I don't know. He just leaves himself vulnerable to a bit of a different game plan from the mage.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of the weakness when you include all of these cards like Walk the Plank and Sap in general, anyways, because you just have less ways to deal with the small stuff and early aggression from mage. Because even though Rogue is a pretty fast deck, like it doesn't really have too much early game, and when you even cut more early game and the reactive stuff, you just leave yourself a bit weak sometimes to pressure.
Flurry here with, I don't know, a slightly weird Edwin turn. Like, not going for the prep there is... I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because what is the prep doing for the next few turns? He has very few draws that make prep good again, right? And it could have just been +2/+2 on Edwin.
Someday I'll be just like you.
Saving it for the second prep.
Ah, yes, of course. Because it was recently nerfed, it means you're losing less value by going for the prep.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe just saying that this is a good enough Edwin, basically. That doesn't need it to be any more. There's definitely potential for the prep. He can get the Togwaggle, he can get the Sap, the Betrayal,
but like
the Walk.
Yeah. I guess it's the prep or the Sap, because like Togwaggle, he still has to get Lackey cards first as well, which seems like a pretty unlikely series of cards to draw.
So, again, Alutemu just not deciding to Frostbolt this Edwin. He just wants to save it for the potential burn, and I don't blame him at all for that. I think that is very good recognition of the situation right here. And Flurry being able to both play the Shark and the Siege this turn is actually incredibly big for him.
Yeah, it's super big here. Even just being able to go Life Drinker next turn is huge. That draw of the Mana Cyclone, though, is insane.
It's so good. It's actually so good, yeah. It's insane.
10 out of 10.
11 out of 10. But yeah. He's just spreading white hair, taking advantage of the mirror images to play around the betrayals.
Yep.
Placing stuff around a bit everywhere, you know, and then picks up more freeze. And
that's insane. He's just killing Flurry. Flurry's just dead.
But Flurry just doesn't have any reactive stuff now, so he is...
I mean, I was going to say a few turns ago that Alutemu, despite having a lot of board control, probably doesn't get the lethal over the next few turns. But he just is. He's just going to win.
They're just nothing reactive. It just loses.
It's Life Drinker, Step, Life Drinker, which does heal 12.
But it doesn't solve the problem right here.
It does not solve the problem.
Which is just freezes into more burn.
So it keeps him alive, but it's not even like the old rogues where you could hit Myra's Unstable Element as the god draw to pull you back from any situation. What can he draw off the top?
Yeah, again, both these games we're seeing the exact scenario I was talking about with this type of sideboard where the mage just goes wide. And we just don't have anything efficient to deal with that. It was pretty fortunate for him, I guess, to get the Blizzards, but he could have also just gotten Burn.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many good cards
there
right?
was a lot of good stuff that he could have gotten. Like
Blizzard wasn't even the best, because obviously Fireball just wins the game on the spot.
Frostball wins the game on the spot. The game was basically just over. And we just basically saw the weakness of Flurry's stroke twice there. Yeah. That's it.
There we go. Thumbs up from Alutemu. I'm glad he got the win on that one, I have to say. I think that the way he built his rogue deck, his mage deck is pretty innovative, because I've never seen his list before with, no Ziliacs, no Sandbinders, Luna's Pocket Galaxy, as well as the Questing Adventurers, which we've seen be very powerful. We saw from Tom60229 in the top 8 of the Vegas Tour, Masters Tour event over the weekend, sideboarding in the 2 copies of Questing Adventurer that were huge in so many games we saw on stream from him in the mirrors. I think it's a pretty cool version of the deck. And from Flurry, like you said, his list looking a little bit weak, suspect against the rogue.
Especially like in these small sample size games we had there in the 2 games. It was unfortunate for him that he turned out to be weak against the early aggression, and Alutemu managed to find ways to get the early aggression. And Alutemu on an 8-1 score now, looking basically in prime position to qualify for the playoffs. So good on him.
Very good on him. I think it's very well deserved. Mage is a deck that is not easy to play at all. We can both attest to. And if Hunter Ace says you're playing well, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah, I liked how Alutemu played in general there. It was a really good recognition of different positions and also just general game plan versus different type of road builds.
Yes, I think so too. But that means we're all done with that match. Our last match of the day, 5th and final, coming up. It is going to be Glory up against Tyler. Our first match of Group B, I believe, as opposed to Division A. Don't go anywhere. This is going to be a very, very good one indeed. Another Mage versus Rogue, so we're going to get to see if it can shake out any differently right after this.